Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, but nobody mentions how easily it washes out when it doesn't match the color scheme of a $70,000 wedding. My sister erased my entire existence to secure her perfect groom. She just forgot I kept the receipts. If you looked at our hands, you would never guess Vanessa and I shared the same DNA. Vanessa's hands were soft, her cuticles pushed back and oiled, her nails painted in muted, expensive neutrals blush, taupe, barest pink. My hands looked like they belonged to a different species. They were rough, the knuckles perpetually dry, with faint, stubborn crescents of grease under the nails that no amount of scrubbing with pumice soap could fully remove. I manage a mid-sized auto repair shop on the outskirts of Denver. It pays the bills, but it doesn't leave you looking like you belong on the cover of a bridal magazine. Vanessa, 3 years older, lived in a downtown loft and worked in high-end real estate PR. She curated her life the way a museum curator handles priceless artifacts. Everything had to look effortless, which meant it required an exhausting amount of hidden labor. For the last 5 years, I was the one doing that labor for our family. Our mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's when I was 23. It was a brutal, ugly decline. There was nothing cinematic about it. It wasn't a gentle fading of memories. It was night terrors, soiled sheets, violent outbursts, and pureeing boiled chicken because she forgot how to chew. I moved out of my apartment and back into our childhood home to take care of her. I worked the early shift at the garage, came home at 3, relieved the part-time nurse I paid for out of my own pocket, and spent the rest of the day and night keeping my mother safe from herself. Vanessa visited twice a year. She would sweep in wearing cashmere, sit on the edge of Mom's bed for 20 minutes, take a carefully angled photo of their hands clasped together, and post it online with a caption about the heartbreak of losing a parent slowly. Then she would claim she couldn't bear the emotional toll of seeing Mom like this and leave before dinner. I didn't fight her on it. I didn't have the energy. By the time Mom finally passed away last November, I was hollowed out. I weighed 20 pounds less than I did in high school. I hadn't slept a full night in half a decade. The funeral was the first time I met Arthur. He was Vanessa's fiancé. They had gotten engaged 6 months prior, during a trip to Tuscany that Vanessa documented endlessly while I was dealing with Mom's third bout of aspiration pneumonia. Arthur was an architect. He was tall, quiet, and carried himself with a steady, unpretentious calm. He wore a dark navy suit that fit perfectly, but he didn't look like he cared about the suit. At the wake, I was standing by the lukewarm coffee urn, staring blankly at a plate of stale sandwiches. Arthur walked over and handed me a glass of water. "You're Chloe," he said. His voice was warm. "I'm Arthur. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thanks," I muttered, taking the water. I hadn't cried yet. I was too numb, operating on pure adrenaline and muscle memory. Arthur looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Vanessa told me how hard it's been. She's been beside herself. I can't imagine the weight she's been carrying, trying to manage the payments for the care facility from the city. She didn't sleep at all last week." I stopped drinking. The water suddenly tasted like metal. Care facility? Mom died in her own bed, down the hall from where we were currently standing. Managing the payments? Vanessa hadn't contributed a single dime to Mom's care. I had drained my savings, maxed out 2 credit cards, and taken out a personal loan to keep the lights on and the home care nurse paid. I looked across the room. Vanessa was leaning into the shoulder of an older aunt, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue, looking tragic and beautiful. I looked back at Arthur. He was watching Vanessa with total admiration and protective tenderness. He genuinely believed she was a martyr. "Right," I said, my voice flat. "It's been a long road." I didn't correct him. I told myself it wasn't the time or the place. We were burying our mother. I didn't want to turn the wake into a shouting match, and frankly, I just wanted everyone out of my house so I could sleep. 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer read the will. The house, which was fully paid off before Mom got sick, was split 50-50 between Vanessa and me. There was no liquid cash left. I knew that better than anyone. Vanessa didn't waste a second. As soon as we stepped out of the lawyer's office into the cold November air, she turned to me. "I need my half of the equity," she said, pulling her coat tight. "Arthur and I are locking down the venue next week. The conservatory requires a 50% deposit." "Vanessa, I live there," I said, staring at her. "I've lived there for 5 years taking care of her." "I know, And I'm glad you had a free place to stay, she said, without a hint of irony. But we need to sell it. The market is hot right now. We can list it by Monday. I'll buy you out, I said immediately. The thought of strangers walking through the rooms where I had fed and bathed my mother made my stomach turn. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. With what money, Chloe? You change brake pads. I'll get a mortgage, I said. I have the income. I'll get it appraised and I'll buy your half. She sighed, checking her watch. Fine, but I need the wire transfer in 30 days, or I'm forcing a sale. I spent the next month jumping through every hoop the bank threw at me. I took on weekend shifts at the garage. I refinanced the house, took on a massive mortgage, and wired Vanessa exactly $215,000. She texted me a thumbs up emoji when the money cleared. That was the last time I heard from her for 4 months. Spring rolled around, and the house felt massive and quiet. I spent my weekends ripping up the old carpets and painting over the scuffed walls, trying to erase the clinical smell of illness that seemed baked into the drywall. Vanessa's wedding was set for early June. Through the family grapevine, mostly our gossipy Aunt Linda, I knew it was going to be an extravagant affair. The venue was a historic botanical conservatory. There was a 12-piece band, imported orchids, and a guest list packed with Arthur's wealthy family and Vanessa's high society clients. I assumed I was a bridesmaid. When March ended and I hadn't received any details about dress fittings, I figured maybe Vanessa was just having a maid of honor. When May arrived and I still hadn't received a formal invitation in the mail, I assumed it got lost. 2 weeks before the wedding, I texted her, "Hey, never got the physical invite. What time do I need to be at the conservatory? Also, is there a dress code?" She didn't text back. The next evening, I was under the hood of my truck in the driveway, covered in grease, trying to fix a blown gasket, when a sleek black Audi pulled up to the curb. Vanessa stepped out. She was wearing tailored trousers and a silk blouse, looking completely out of place on our cracked concrete driveway. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked over. "Hey," I said. "Didn't expect to see you." Vanessa didn't hug me. She looked at my grease-stained overalls and visibly wrinkled her nose. "We need to talk. Let's go inside." We went into the kitchen. She refused to sit on the chairs I had just reupholstered. She stood by the island, her posture rigid. "Look, Chloe, I'm just going to say it," she started, crossing her arms. "I didn't send you an invitation." I stopped wiping my hands. The rag fell still. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're not invited to the wedding." Her voice was calm, clinical, like she was canceling a subscription service. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, the confusion morphed into a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. "Vanessa, I'm your sister, your only sister. And I love you," she said quickly. "The way you say bless you when someone sneezes. Totally automatic. But this wedding, it's a very specific crowd. Arthur's parents are flying in from Boston. His father is a state judge. My biggest clients are going to be there. It's a strict black tie, highly curated event. I know how to wear a dress, Vanessa." "It's not just the dress," she snapped, losing her composed veneer for a second. She gestured up and down at me. "It's you. You're rough, Chloe. You drop F-bombs. You have oil permanently tattooed into your skin. You drink beer out of the bottle. You don't fit into this world. I've spent years building this life, building my reputation. I can't have you showing up and reminding everyone where I came from." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. She was ashamed of me. She was ashamed of the sister who had wiped our mother's chin and bought out her half of the house so she could afford the very wedding I was being banned from. "So I'm a dirty secret," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic. We'll get dinner next month. Just the two of us," she said, adjusting her designer bag on her shoulder. "It's better this way, honestly. You'd be miserable around these people anyway." She turned and walked out the front door before I could even formulate a response. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I felt a stinging behind my eyes, but I didn't cry. I was too angry for tears. I was angry, but I accepted it. I decided right then that I was done. If she wanted to cut me out, she could. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I planned to spend her wedding day working under a car, miles away from the conservatory and her imported orchids. Then, 4 days before the wedding, someone knocked on my door. It was a Tuesday night. I was eating takeout on the couch. I opened the front door to find Arthur standing on the porch. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater, but he looked incredibly uncomfortable. He was holding a thick white envelope. "Arthur?" I said, pulling the door open wider. "Is everything okay? Where's Vanessa?" "She's at a final tasting with the caterer," he said. He didn't meet my eyes. "She doesn't know I'm here. Can I come in?" "Sure." I stepped aside. He walked into the living room, looking around. He seemed surprised by how clean and normal it looked. He stood awkwardly by the coffee table, clutching the envelope with both hands. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said, his voice tight. "Vanessa made me promise not to engage with you. She said it was dangerous." I frowned. "Dangerous? Arthur, what are you talking about?" He let out a long, heavy breath, finally looking at me. His eyes were full of a deep, tragic pity that made my skin crawl. "Chloe, I know why you're not at the wedding. Vanessa told me everything." I crossed my arms. "Did she? Did she tell you she thinks I'm white trash and I'll embarrass her in front of your dad?" Arthur looked shocked. "What? No. No, Chloe. She didn't say anything like that. She loves you." He took a step forward, his tone dropping to a gentle, placating whisper. "She told me about the addiction." The silence in the room became absolute. The only sound was a car driving past on the street outside. "The what?" I asked, completely genuinely. "The pills," Arthur said sadly. "You don't have to lie to me. Vanessa told me how it started after Mom got sick, how you couldn't cope." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Arthur kept talking, oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped on my reality. "She told me how you drained Mom's retirement accounts to buy drugs, how you abandoned Mom, forcing Vanessa to hire full-time private care out of her own pocket. She told me how you showed up at her apartment last year, high out of your mind, demanding money. That's why she cut contact. She said she couldn't enable you anymore, and she couldn't risk having you at the wedding in case you tried to steal from the guests." My vision blurred. The edges of the room went dark. It wasn't just that Vanessa excluded me for aesthetics. She had built her entire relationship with Arthur on a foundation of monstrous sociopathic lies. She had taken my sacrifice, my exhaustion, and my poverty, and twisted it to make herself the victim. Arthur held out the thick white envelope. "This is from me," he said softly. "It's a cashier's check for $20,000. It's for rehab. There's a facility in Boulder. I called them. They have a bed open. Please, Chloe, get help. Vanessa cries herself to sleep missing the sister you used to be." I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Arthur. He was a good man. He was a genuinely good man trying to save a drowning woman. He just didn't know he was married to the person who pushed her in. A terrifying, cold calm washed over me. The anger from last week vanished, replaced by something sharp and surgical. "Arthur," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "Stay right there." I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked down the hall to the small office that used to be a storage closet. I opened the heavy metal filing cabinet where I kept the physical records of the last 5 years of my life. I pulled out the thick, green accordion folder labeled Mom, Financials, Medical. I walked back into the living room. Arthur was still standing there, holding out the envelope, looking confused. I bypassed the envelope. I opened the folder, pulled out a stack of paper, and dropped it onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Arthur asked, looking down. "Sit down, Arthur," I said, pointing to the sofa. "You and I are going to have a little reading comprehension test." Arthur hesitated, looking at the worn fabric of the sofa as if checking for hidden traps. Then he sat. I pushed the pile of papers across the coffee table toward him. "Open it," I said, leaning back against the doorframe. "Start with the bank statements on the left." He picked up the first stack, his brow furrowed as he scanned the top page. "This is a wire transfer confirmation. For $215,000, I clarified, tapping the highlighted line. "From me to Vanessa. Dated last December. The buyout for her half of this house." "Does that look like the bank account of an addict draining her mother's funds?" He blinked, turning the page. She said, "Look at the next pile," I interrupted. "Invoices from Oak Creek Home Care. Paid in full, every 2 weeks, for 4 years. Look at the name on the billing address." Arthur's finger traced the text. "Chloe Hayes." Now the pharmacy receipts, the grocery delivery bills, The property tax records. I laid them out like a dealer pitching cards on a casino table. Find me one piece of paper with Vanessa's name on it. Just one. Find me a single dollar she contributed to keeping our mother alive. He sat there in silence, shuffling through the papers. The rustle of paper filled the quiet room. I watched his breathing change. It started shallow, then hitched, and then he just stopped breathing altogether for a few long seconds. The final document I handed him was a notarized letter from the hospice nurse, thanking me for being the sole caregiver and praising my dedication during Mom's final violent days. Arthur stared at the nurse's signature. His face had lost all its color, taking on the waxy pallor of someone going into shock. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a ledge and was waiting to hit the concrete. "She told me you stole Mom's jewelry to buy pills," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Mom didn't have jewelry," I said flatly. "She sold her wedding ring in 2008 to fix the roof." Arthur dropped the papers back onto the table. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. A long, agonizing groan tore out of his throat. It wasn't the sound of a man angry at being lied to. It was the visceral sound of a man mourning the death of the woman he thought he loved. "Why?" he asked, looking up at me, his eyes rimmed with red. "Why would she invent something so evil?" "Because it's easier to be a tragic victim than a selfish daughter," I answered. "If I'm a monster, she doesn't have to explain why she never visited. If I'm an addict, she doesn't have to explain why I'm not at the wedding. It preserves her perfect image, and Vanessa will burn the world down to keep her image perfect." Arthur slowly stood up. He left the white envelope with the rehab money on the table. He looked around my living room again, really seeing it this time. The clean floors, the patched drywall, the quiet dignity of a home that had survived a long, hard war. "I have to go," he said, his voice hollow. "Take the folder," I said. He stopped at the door, turning back. "Take it," I repeated, picking up the green accordion file and shoving the papers back inside. "I have digital copies. You might need this." He took the heavy folder. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked out into the dark. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Saturday. At 1:45, I was elbow deep in the engine bay of a 2014 Ford F-150, trying to coax a stripped spark plug out of its cylinder without damaging the threads. The garage was hot. The radio in the corner was playing classic rock over the steady hiss of the air compressor. I hadn't heard from Arthur or Vanessa since Tuesday night. I assumed the wedding was proceeding. Wealthy people have a remarkable ability to compartmentalize scandals. I figured Arthur had confronted her. They had a screaming match, and they decided to save face for the sake of the deposit and the judge's family. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist, leaving a streak of grease across my skin. Then, the bay door sensors chimed. I didn't look up right away. "Be right with you," I yelled over the radio. Nobody answered. I tightened my grip on the socket wrench, finally standing up and wiping my hands on my shop rag. Arthur was standing in the middle of the garage floor. He was wearing a custom-tailored black tuxedo. The bow tie hung loose around his neck, the ends resting against his crisp, pleated white shirt. A white ranunculus boutonniere was pinned to his lapel, looking absurdly fragile against the backdrop of tire racks and heavy-duty tool chests. He looked exhausted, but the hollow, devastated look from Tuesday night was gone. In its place was a sharp, focused clarity. I stared at him. The clock on the wall read 1:55 p.m. "Aren't you supposed to be at the altar?" I asked, tossing the rag onto the workbench. Arthur walked forward, his expensive leather shoes crunching faintly on the concrete floor. I left. He didn't say it with dramatic flair, he just stated it as a fact. "Just now?" I asked. "About 20 minutes ago," Arthur said, leaning against a stack of all-season tires. He didn't seem to care about the brake dust transferring to his tuxedo jacket. The string quartet was playing. The guests were seated. Vanessa was in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids. "And you just walked out?" "No," he said gently. "I didn't just walk out." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, unlocking it and sliding it across the hood of the Ford toward me. I picked it up. It was a video, paused on the first frame. "Press play," he said. I tapped the screen. The video showed the inside of the opulent bridal suite at the conservatory. Vanessa was standing in the center of the room in her custom gown, looking like a porcelain doll. Her bridesmaids, wearing identical blush-colored dresses, were gathered around her, holding champagne flutes. Arthur was holding the camera, stepping into the room. The green accordion folder was tucked under his arm. "Arthur, what are you doing in here?" "It's bad luck," Vanessa's voice chirped through the phone speaker, bright and artificial. Arthur didn't smile on the video. He walked over to the vanity table and set the thick green folder down with a heavy thud. "I brought a wedding gift," Arthur's voice said from behind the camera. "I thought we should go over some financial disclosures before we sign the marriage license." Vanessa's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the folder. I watched the exact second she recognized the faded green cardboard. The color drained from her face so fast she looked ill. "Arthur, please. Not right now. We have guests waiting." "No, I think right now is the perfect time," Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Since you told your maid of honor last night that your sister couldn't be here because she's currently in a rehab facility in Boulder, I thought your friends would like to see the receipts from the home care nurse she paid for out of her own pocket for 4 years. The bridesmaids exchanged confused, horrified glances. One of them slowly lowered her champagne flute. Vanessa lunged for the folder. "Stop it! You're ruining my day." "You ruined your sister's life," Arthur countered, stepping back so she couldn't reach him. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The quiet disgust in his voice was 1,000 times more lethal. "You lied to me. You lied about your mother. You lied about Chloe. You stole her money, let her carry the weight of your family's tragedy, and then you tried to erase her to protect your aesthetic. I'm not marrying a sociopath, Vanessa. Arthur, please. Let's just go out there. We can talk about this later." "There is no later," Arthur said. The camera panned down slightly as he turned toward the door. "The wedding is off. You can explain to your clients and my family why I'm leaving. Or you can show them the folder. Your choice." The video ended with the sound of the heavy wooden door clicking shut over the sound of Vanessa screaming his name. I handed the phone back to him. My hands were perfectly steady. The air compressor hissed, filling the silence in the garage. "She's going to tell everyone you lost your mind," I pointed out. Arthur offered a small, tired smile. "I gave the green folder to my father on the way out. He's a judge, Chloe. He reads bank statements for fun. She won't control the narrative this time." I leaned against the truck, looking at this man who had detonated his entire life rather than build it on a lie. "So what now?" "Now, I go back to Boston," he said, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "I have a flight in 3 hours, but I wanted to come here first." He extended his hand. It was a formal gesture, full of respect. "I'm sorry, Chloe, for believing her, for walking into your home and accusing you of things you didn't do. You deserved a better sister." I wiped my hand on my jeans to make sure the grease was gone, and I shook his hand. His grip was firm. "Have a safe flight, Arthur," I said. He nodded, turned around, and walked out of the garage. I watched his black car pull out of the lot and merge onto the highway, disappearing into the Saturday traffic. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just picked up my socket wrench, turned back to the Ford, and got back to work. Later that evening, my phone started ringing. It was Aunt Linda, then a cousin, then Vanessa. I watched her name flash on the screen, the vibrating phone rattling against my kitchen counter. I didn't answer. I blocked her number, picked up the phone, and tossed it onto the sofa. The house was quiet. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of illness anymore, nor the tense silence of waiting for a buyout check to clear. It was just peace. The walls were painted, the debts were settled, and the rot had finally been cut out. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out a cold beer. I popped the cap off, took a long drink right from the bottle, and for the first time in 5 years, I slept through the night. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to bury you is to simply hand over the shovel they used. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found value in this narrative of standing your ground and exposing the truth, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more deeply human, real-life stories. Your support means everything.